Hi and welcome. My name is Rossy and today we're making these adorable floral bunny earrings. And the best part, you won't need any cutters. Let's get started. To begin, we're going to need this template. It's available on my website and we're going to be cutting out these cutouts, even though that sounds really redundant. So we have two separate designs and you can either make both or just choose the one you prefer. And once we have those cut out, we're going to measure 1 tablespoon of cold porcelain clay in white. You can also choose whichever color you prefer. We're just using white for this particular tutorial. And if you need to know how to make our recipe, you can find it here on the channel as well. And I'm going to link it on the description box and also on the card on the top right. So now I'm just stretching that out after kneading it thoroughly. I'm using these two skewers just to help me keep it even all throughout as I roll it out and make it flat. And once that's done, I'm going to just get this either like an acrylic page, resin, acetate, just anything you have that's very smooth. And I'm adding some Vaseline on it and then placing the rolled out clay on top of it. And now we're going to need either a pin or a needle to get a clean cut since we're not going to be using cutters for these. Of course, if you have cutters, you can definitely use them. If you don't, this is one way to get those really neat edges. So now I'm just following along the cutout using, again, either a pin or a needle. Just being very careful and going all the way around. And I'm making those straight lines towards the edge of the clay piece just to make sure it's easier to lift it from the rest of the clay. And you can see it's very neat and it's going to be very easy to smooth everything down. Now I'm going to cut the others in the exact same way. So I'm just placing them here and I'm going to make a cut here so you can see them already. And I'm just going to show you the other design first. Going all around, single line, trying to make sure it doesn't move a lot. Mine moved a little bit, but I was able to put it back in place. And then just cutting all around. There we go. And again, making those lines towards the edge to make it easier to lift it without getting the rest of the clay stuck. Now this one here, being very careful. If you want to make sure it's even easier, make sure to add more Vaseline. Now I'm just going to cut the others and there we go. Now you can see them here. And now we're going to smooth down the edges using a little bit of Vaseline. Just placing it on that edge right there and very lightly rubbing it to make them smooth. Once we're all done with that, it's going to look like this. Very nice and rounded edges. And now here I'm going back to my cutout. You can see that that little folded ear has a small dent or indent on the clay. So I'm just going in and making sure that one stands out. I'm using this knife tool here. You can also use any kind of cutter that could work, or a ruler, a metallic ruler could work as well. Just try to look for tools you have around your home already that could work for this. And now we have both of them even. Now the ones at the top don't need any changes. So I'm just letting everything dry now here on top of a sponge. This will help make sure they dry flat and they don't curl around the edges. Now after a couple of minutes, we will turn them around and let them dry the rest of the way. The clay might try to, the edges might try to turn upward, which is why we do this by drying it on the sponge. And then once that's dry, we can start adding the decoration. I have this all set, all my little flowers and buds, as well as the leaves. All the information for these is on the template, so you can find it there. You need 1/8 of a teaspoon, tablespoon, all the measurements are there. And now I'm going to get some natural color clay and a little bit of magenta to make these roses. That way you get that very nice rosy color center. I was at a loss for words there for a minute. So I'm measuring that 1/8 of a teaspoon and then stretching that out a little bit into a cylinder. Once we have the cylinder, I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to store the rest of my clay to make sure it doesn't dry while I'm working on this. Now, these halves, I'm going to cut them in half again so I get 4 pieces now. And now, these pieces, I'm going to cut it into 3 more pieces each. So now we have 12 out of that main piece we made at first. There we go. And now we can start working. So I'm just going to get one piece, flatten it, and then make it sort of like a circle. And that's when I start rolling it up like a spiral. And that is going to be the center of a rose. Then for the second one, I'm doing the same thing, just rolling it around the first one I made. And we're going to keep going that way. If you watch other videos, we've made roses before, so this can be repetitive if you've already watched our videos. But if it's your first time, we're going to go step by step. And as you can see, I'm leaving them a little bit more open at the top now, but still making sure I secure them at the bottom. So the whole rose is very nicely structured and won't come apart. And as I keep adding layers, I make sure they're even more open and more open to give them that rose shape. Now I'm on my 5th petal here, and at this point, being a bit more careful on those layers, making sure they're even more open. And as you can see, I'm just adding a little bit of pressure to get that little round shape. It doesn't need to be a perfect circle. If anything, that organic shape will make it look even more natural. And I'm just adding some little curves here, and now we have our little rose. And now, just to make it stand out, I'm going to add a little bit of shading, and for that I'm using eyeshadows. You can also use powder toners if you have any, or if it's easier for you to find those. The ones that are used for fondant work just fine. And now, if we need these to be like a full rose that I'm going to place on the stem and everything, then we're not going to cut off that bottom part. But if we're going to be placing them on top of things, we do need to make them flat at the bottom. So you notice I just made a simple cut with the scissors, and that's perfectly fine. And just keep in mind that cold porcelain clay will shrink when it dries, which is why I'm making these a little bit bigger, and they will just get a tiny bit smaller once they're dry. If you want to know how small, you would just need to test out your particular clay after following the recipe. It shouldn't be too much, but it's a matter of practice. And now for the leaves, as you can see, I'm just getting those tiny pieces and then making them in circle, making them flat, then giving it that sort of drop or teardrop shape. And then I'm just adding some details with the knife tool again. Adding some lines, a single line down the center, and then towards the outside. And if you have those little like pattern markers, now give me a second, I'm gonna go find the name. And I got it. So those are either textures or texture plates. And if you have those, you can just lightly press the clay on top of it and it will get that shape in one easy go. So it's just up to you. I'm just showing you one way you can do that if you don't have any of those tools. Now for these little like pieces that come out of the rose as well, I'm just getting small pieces of clay and stretching them out, making them pointy on both ends as thin as I can, and then just cutting them in half and then layering them on top to get this sort of like an asterisk. It's just 6 different peaks. And now I'm going to add a little bit of glue in the center right there. And then that's where I'm going to add the rose. In my case, I'm using one that's already dry because if I use the one that I just made, which is fresh, I can't add enough pressure because it's going to lose its shape. So instead, I'm using a dry one just to make sure I can move it as I need to. And then I just rolled up those little spikes, we're going to call them spikes for now, towards the outside of the rose just to get them there. In my case, as you can see, the ones I'm holding right now, I like to make them all at once and let them dry, and then it's just easier to work in and add roses whenever I'm making a separate project. So I just have a bunch of little roses in stock at all times. And if we need these ones as well, I'm just going to show you how to make those. Again, one of these small pieces we have here, and we're going to cut it into 4 pieces. Each piece, we're going to make it into a circle, then into a drop. And I'm making 2 at once here. And same for that last one. And then I'm going to place them all together, getting 4 at a time, just like this. And now we have that extra little detail. Just like that. We can also use this for decoration and just add it throughout our project to fill in gaps and everything. And if you want to make these flowers right here as well, I'm using blue clay, this light blue clay. And since they're very tiny too, I'm getting 1/8 of a teaspoon of clay, stretching it out into a cylinder, cut it in half, then half again, and then cutting each one of those pieces in half again. And now we have 8. Now, these pieces we're going to cut in half again and get 16 total. You can also just calculate and measure out the clay. I'm just giving you a reference if you want to keep them the same size or you want to follow the tutorial like step by step and make them like the ones I have. This is the measurement that works. Now for what you see me doing here, making that small hole, I'm just using a skewer. You can use a toothpick. You can use one of these tools if you have one. This one is a star tool. And we're just making those holes there. And now we're going to cut this, well, make 4 cuts on the outside of that circle. And just open it up. And there we go. You have the little flower. So now just to make it stand out, I'm adding that little bit of shading again using eyeshadows. And then I'm closing it back so it looks like this. And they're like little buds. Now if we're going to make the ones that are open, we're going to do the same thing. Make those 4 cuts right there. Space them out so we can see them even more. Or even better actually. And once we have all 4 there, I'm just going to place it between both fingers that you can see there just to make sure I have a good grip on it. And using that star tool, I'm just adding a little bit of texture to each petal right there. And then highlighting the circle in the center just to make that center stand out more. And that's it. There we go. Now to let it dry, I like to place them top down on the sponge. That way the petals can stay open a little bit better. And that's it. Now for the other details that we have here, sort of like a vine, I'm measuring again 1/8 of a teaspoon, cutting it in half, then half again, and we're just going to get 16 pieces one more time. Now, using only one of these 16 pieces we made, we're going to do the same thing we did before and just stretch that out with 2 pointy ends. And once it's as thin as we need it, we're going to split it in half and continue stretching them out. Just like that. And once we have that ready there, we're going to start curling it from one end. Just like that to start forming that sort of spiral. And I'm going to do that again for this other one. Just like that. So we're just making tiny spirals, tiny half spirals. They're just a little bit curved. And I'm making 2 for each of these earrings. And these are dry enough now. Of course, you can wait for them to dry even more, but this works. And as you can see, the only difference between these is just the ear. So the design we're going to make is roughly going to be the same, but you'll see my choices in a bit. And of course, you can make your own different choices and add as many or as little of these little details as you want. So for the pairs, I just try to make sure they're mirrored. So if I add a rose on the left of the left earring, in this case just on the screen, then I'm going to add the other one on the right, just to keep everything balanced. I don't want them to look the same. I want them to look mirrored. So when you wear them, it's not like you're wearing a duplicate of the earring. They actually look like a pair. Again, this is just personal choice, so you can do as you please with your design. And I would love to see if you make these, I would love to see them. So if you want to send them over either via Instagram or Facebook or even on our website, if you want to just share your creations, we would love to see them. And again, I'm just making sure I mirror everything I do on one of these on the other earring. So I'm just adding leaves now, trying to find the best place for it. And in my case, you can see this one was a little bit too long, so I'm just going to cut off a small piece. Or you can also just go and make them smaller. You're going to notice very quickly that you can make a lot of these small pieces and just have them in stock for different projects. So you can make different sizes and then just try to find the sizes that work for you. Now, in my case, I wanted to make sure they look a little bit more layered. So I removed those blue flowers and I placed the leaf underneath them. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other one, just accounting for that. And again, trying to find a small leaf, trying to keep them as even as possible, but you know they're not going to be identical because we're not using cutters. And this is all handmade, and that is the beauty of handmade. You get completely unique pieces each time. And just trying to make sure they're relatively even. And as I mentioned before, just mirrored. So I added that top leaf on the left, so the other one's going to go on the right. That bottom leaf and small buds on the right now, and the same thing on the left one. And now I'm going to go back in and add these little spirals with a little bit of glue. And I'm going from that top leaf into the other ear. Doing the same thing for the other one, but first I'm just going to add one more here at the bottom. If these are too long, you can always cut them. We're not working with dry clay, we're working with almost dry clay. So it's just a little bit, we just let it sit in the air for a while, let it air dry for a bit. And if you're working with miniatures, you can also use tweezers if it's easier to work with them. I find it a bit more difficult to work with tweezers, adding a little bit of pressure, so I mostly use them just to arrange items on my piece. And then again, mirroring the other one, I'm adding that bottom vine on the one on the left. And now we have both little earrings ready. Now that we have those ready, we can move on to the other two. Now, these ones I'm going to follow a similar design. But for this one, I'm going to add the rose or the flower on the other side. And again, I'm just trying to follow that mirror concept effect. Just trying to make sure if I add one thing on the left, it's going to be on the right on the other one. And I might sound repetitive right now. I'm just trying to explain why I'm not placing them on the same place on both earrings. And again, this is completely up to you, so I'm just deciding how I want it to look right now. Using these tweezers to help me place the spiral or the little vine piece right where I want it. And in my case, I also have these little buds here, these little rose buds. And I didn't share these and back like a couple of minutes back, so I'm showing you how to do that one now. We have one of those small pieces, make it into a cylinder, and I'm using that rolling pin just to make it flat, making it very thin, and then we're just going to roll it, sort of like we're going to start making a rose. Rolling it all the way and adding some more pressure at the bottom so it's secure. And that's it. Now we're just going to add some shading, and there you go. We have a little tiny rosebud. Very, very tiny. So it's like the way you would make a rose, just don't add any more layers. And I'm adding these little rosebuds in between here, in between the spaces. And I like to make sure they're roughly the same size so everything looks even. They look like they match nicely together. And since I was focused on finding the right sizes, I forgot that mirror effect for a second, but I'm going back to it, so that's why you saw me change that one right there. And I'm just going to go in and fill in the gaps, add some more leaves and spirals and little bits of vegetation, just like that. Now I'm going to add one more rosebud here. I'm just trying to compare them side by side to make sure they're equal in size. And I'm going to add that towards the outside of my earring. And just repeating it one more time, the decoration is completely up to you and your own taste. Just like that. And now we're going to let these dry, and I'm going to share one more way to make them that is personally the way I prefer. Now for these ones, we're going to need 1/2 of a teaspoon. That's also listed on the template, so you can see it for the bunny head and the ears. And these are going to be more 3D. They're not going to be flat. So I'm just going to start by rolling that out into a cylinder, cutting it in half, then half again, so you get 4 pieces. And one of those pieces, I'm just rolling it up into a ball to sort of get it smooth and even. And then I'm just stretching those out. I'm making all 4 ears at once here. And there we go. And once we have them ready, I'm going to go ahead and make them flat. I'm using my thumb for this. You can use any tools you have as well. Just like that. And I'm trying not to make them too flat. I want them to have some level of volume and detail. So now I'm going in with that rubber brush to add like the inner part of the ear. And now we have a nice edge to that bunny ear. And then you can also start modeling it to give it a little bit more shape, or keep it as simple as you like. And now that we have that ready, I'm going in with some eyeshadow and then just adding some shading in the center to make that little pink part of the bunny ear. And at the top here, I'm bringing the clay together so we get that volume. Now, on this part, I'm making, well, this is the process for making the ones that are going to be straight. I have 2 already set here. And I'm also going to show you how to make the ones that are folded. There we go. And remember one more time that when the clay dries, it shrinks a little bit. You can see that happening on the left ones there. They're smaller. And again, now we're making that folded ear. We're going to do the same thing with that rubber brush, adding that indent down the middle of her ear, just like that. Adding that shading. And for this one, I'm not going to make it pointy at the top. I'm going to fold it. You can see that there. And now we have a nice little fun ear. And that's all you need to do to get that folded look. Now I'm setting aside these ones I just made because I'm going to start to focus on showing you how to make the head, the little bunny head. So for that, we're using that 1/2 teaspoon of white clay. Again, you can make these in any color you want. And I'm just kneading that thoroughly into a ball to make it nice and smooth. And then you can see I added a little bit of pressure to make it a little bit flat, but we're still keeping that volume. We're not making it fully flat. And if you need it, you can go back to the template just to reference the size. And now we're going to attach the ears to our little bunny. I'm adding a little bit of glue to the bottom of the ears, that pointy side, and then just placing them into the head. Well, inserting them into the head. And now we have the same thing, but with volume. So you won't need to work on cutting it out or using any cutters. This is completely 3D and just overall really nice. Like I said before, this is my preferred way of making these. I like them to have texture and then just have that, well, that volume. I really like how they look. And I'm just decorating this one the same way we did for the other one. So just choosing your preferred placement for each little piece, rose, leaf, and vine. And I'm just doing that all around. And as you can see, it's very similar, but it's also very different. I especially like that little touch of the pink on the ears, and you can also do that on the flat ones. So have fun. And okay, for this one here, we can use it as sort of like a pendant to match the earrings. Since we have a similar design with that rose and just a separate leaves, it can work with either of these pairs we have here. And I'm just going to show you quickly how to make the little hoop that you can attach to the clay piece so then we can use it as a pendant. So I'm just twisting it there, making sure it's nice and secure, and I leave that part long enough because that's what I'm going to insert into my clay piece, far enough to make sure it won't come out. That's going to make sure it's nice and secure and I'm not going to lose my pendant the first day I wear it. So you can see it's a very long piece that goes into the clay piece, but also it's twisted at the bottom. We have like a little angle to make sure it stays in place. And we can use these other pieces like this ones. You can find either brass charms or just any material you prefer. And I'm just going to insert them into that little loop we just made. Close it, and now we have a little pendant. Just like that. Of course, you can attach it to any kind of necklace, so leather, gold, brass, or any other kind of material. That part is completely up to you, and that's just part of jewelry making. So if you want me to talk more about jewelry making and the different materials and things you can use, let me know in the comments, and we can definitely work on making something. I'm also going to try to find other resources you can look into and other creators who might be able to help you get started on jewelry making. Now I'm using this little piece of jewelry glue. This is A600. I'm just adding it to the piece right here, to the backing of the earring that I'm going to be using. I let it dry for a little bit. You can see it's only going to be a couple of seconds. This is going to help it attach better to the clay piece. Just like that. And I'm going to attach it on the back of the clay piece here. And I'm going to let that dry. It's usually better to let the clay piece dry fully before we attach the earring backing, just to make sure we won't change its shape while attaching it. And there's another technique to attach them, because I don't like seeing that little part on the back of my earrings, and I feel like it's a little bit fragile. So for that, I like to measure a small piece of clay. I'm going to get 1/8 of a teaspoon. I'm just putting those tools apart there to clear some space. And I'll just stretch that out, and I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces, then in half again to get 8. And one of these pieces, I'm just going to stretch it out, form it into a ball, and then make it flat. I want to make sure it's nice and round and very flat, and I'm just stretching it so it's a little bit bigger than the earring backing, so it can stand out and provide a better fit and secure the backing in place. If you want it to look even neater, you can definitely just cut it. This works for me, so I'm just going to insert the backing into it, remove any excess that got stuck in the pin, and then I add white glue all around the clay and the backing, and then attach it to the back of my clay piece, my clay creation here. And that way we don't need any kind of jewelry glue or anything. Clay will stick to clay, and it's going to make sure it stays in place. Of course, you can also account for this and add some more texture so you won't get that little bump on the back. If you don't mind it, of course, or if you forgot to factor it in at first, you can definitely just do this and it's going to work as well. And once we have all of them set, I'm going to let them fully dry, either the entire piece or just the backing we just added. I'm going to let it dry on top of a sponge. Again, that's going to make sure it dries evenly. It won't change or lose its shape. And everything is going to stay the same way we finish making them. Just like that. I feel like these are very easy, very simple, and of course very fun. You can make any kind of design you like. You can alter what's going to be on top of your little bunny silhouettes. And well, that's it. So I hope you liked today's class. Thank you for joining me once again. My name is Rossy. Many blessings.